Okay, so bear with me because I'm just going to kind of walk through this 100%. So if you already know some of these steps, which I know you do for bringing the models in, I just want to make sure you do. So let me just ramble as we go. So part of this ties in with the projects that we'll be doing, wherein you'll have multiple bodies or multiple parts for your design. And then at the same time, you'll be creating assemblies like we did last time. We'll do a little bit more on the assemblies. What we'll also do is create exploded views. So if I come in here, I'll add a configuration. We're just going to call it exploded view.
I just want to make sure you're recording this, Chevis.
Yep, I got it.
Awesome.
Got it. And then we'll go new exploded view. And basically what it is because you've got an assembly, you can grab the parts. Oh no, not that. And what you can do is, where's my edit? Create steps. Let's go there. We'll grab that and that. And end up creating exploded views for your assembly. So, for example, I'll get rid of that one and I'll open this one up. And the reason for this is I'll show you later on, but you can then use this is for what's called a BOM. You'll hear that term used a lot, which is a bill of materials or an assembly drawing. So bill of materials is basically what are all the components, what are their characteristics, you know, how do you reference them, and what do they cost. So we're not going to worry too much about that today because I just want to pull them in as individual parts. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the part. Oops. Let me turn that off. And we're just going to go up to File. And we're going to do, you've got a couple different things you can do. You can go to New. Oops. And make a drawing. And that will come straight into it. This has a template. So, or what you can do is you can go File. Make drawing for assembly. It doesn't really matter. Just like in SolidWorks, there's multiple ways to click and do something. So let me just grab my coffee. So for this, we're just going to go new. We're going to make a drawing. We'll get into later on, but there's different templates that you can do. There's also some tutorials that I'll have you do as well. Get back to drawing. We're going to go OK. Now, right off the bat, what we have is you want to set up your page. What are you going to draw on? So you've got A1, A2, A3, A4. This part was done in millimeters. So it's giving you the millimeter sizes. If I turn off only show standards, then what it gives you is A, B, C. A is, and you can look at these and find them, but A size is 8.5 by, and these are standard, 8.5 by 11. B is 11 by 17. C is 22 by 34. And the best way to remember that is if this is an A size, the B size is basically you're just flipping it over. C size is this with two more. So that's how you kind of know what sizes you're drawing on. The size that you're drawing is going to determine a couple things. How big is your part? How much detail information do you want to have on that drawing? Do you need to do multiple drawings or what? For the most part, let's just assume 11 by 17, which is going to be B, and we'll do landscape. Now, at another day, we'll talk about how to make custom borders. But for now, we're just going to go with what they've got here. So, open document, we're going to select that. We're going to dump in our first view. Hold on. What did I just do? I exited out of something. Okay, so we're going to just, for this full drawing, we're just going to go with our standard 3-view layout. And it's always, and we're defining this as the front, so you know, or this view. It's always top, front, side. If you want the bottom, it goes below. If you want the other side, it goes over here. And the reason for that is back when you guys did your class with Thornton, whoops. What you can do is if you have your, come on, your page like so, we'll do this down here and we'll do this at a 45-degree angle. So if this is your page layout and you've got your top, your front, and your side, you can draw everything and get your isometric view this way. And what you can also do, if you do this right, which I didn't do, these parts, so when you do the side, let's say you've got grooves in here. Well, in order to make sure you got your grooves right here, what you do is you do your light line here. And that guarantees that your grooves are in the proper spots. So that's kind of where that came from and the reason why you have that top front view. And then with an isometric view, whatever kind of view that comes up over there. So, couple things now. Before we start, what we want to do is let's at least start off by editing what is known as our sheet format. So we're just going to come up and we're going to double click on sheet format, and then that hides everything else because all you're doing is editing your sheet. So very much like Illustrator or anything, this is the file name that was used. So if I'm going to edit that, I want to double click it, make it so it fits. You know, and then you're going to put whatever other information you need, your name, you know, whatever. Usually by default, and if I get a chance, I'll just make a template for you guys. But in the least, what I like to have is name, which is you, product, sheet. So if you've got multiple sheets, it's sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3. Date. And then if you have a company logo or something, you know, you just toss that in there. So, but bare minimum information that you should have on that and have it consistent. If you have branding, you know, you toss that on there. If you have a logo, get that on there. Let's go back. So we've got that. We added all that in, you know, delete what we don't need. But just to go through this, this is what an engineer needs. So the drawing's not to scale, or the drawing is to scale. What is the material? What is the finish of the part? As industrial designers, a lot of times we will spec that. A lot of times we won't spec that. But it needs to be on there because that goes to the manufacturers. Who's it drawn by? Who was it approved by? You don't usually, like, if you do a drawing to send out to someone, you always have to have someone approve it. Or you should have someone check it. Who's the manufacturer, quality control, all those things. So let's assume that we filled that all out. We got it set up. Let's go back to our parts. Now, let me double click on this. So I'm going to double click on the box, and it's going to pull up all the information for this box. So this is currently, from a scale standpoint, if I come down, where's my scale? Hold on. Oh, here we go. If I come and use custom scales, this is 1:1 right now. Well, that's kind of small. It doesn't mean that I put it on a smaller piece of paper, because when I go to dimension this, no one's going to be able to read it. So I'm going to make it a custom scale. I'll click on here, and I'm going to make it 2:1. Now you can see you can do 1:1, 1:2, 1:5. So you can make it smaller. You can make it bigger. Why did it not do it?
I think there's a drop down on the bottom right of your screen. You can change the scale of everything at once.
Yay! You rock.
And then it's
So now you can kind of see that we've got things are going to at least be a little bit easier to read when I give the drawing to someone. You don't want to have to squint. Now, as we talked about before, you can see that I've got this extra part in here. So we don't want that, because that was something I 3D modeled. So I've got a choice. I can right click it and hide it, which gets that all to disappear. Or if I come in, what part was that? What I can do is I can come in, open up that part, come on. And if I had a sketch in here, which I've already hidden, I could, let me just get one of these sketches on here that's going to show something up. There we go. I could hide them in the part file. Okay. Now, you've got a lot of options in here. So as you go through, let's just see here if I got it down here too. Nope. I can do the, oh no, my roof got hidden. Whatever. I could do shaded view with lines, just the outlines, hidden lines. So it all depends on what you're doing. There are times where you want to do the hidden lines, but it's what are you using this drawing for? How are you starting off? So for this page, all we want to do is some general overall key dimensions. So with that said, let's start drafting. Now, if we recall, and we come up and we go to our options, and we go to document properties, up here, exactly that, drafting standards. This is where you're going to edit all your dimensions to get it to look the way you want. And what you can do is you can save these out as templates too, so that you're not having to do it every time. But there are times where you'll have to adjust it because different paper sizes, different dimensions. So first, what I like to do is let's just start off and see where we're at. So we're going to come in and we're going to do a smart dimension, and let's just go with the widest point. So not a bad size, but I don't necessarily like it that it is 3 decimal places. I'm going to come over here, I'm going to make it 2. But at the same time, that's just for that drawing, or that's just for that dimension. If I come over here, you can see I've still got 3 decimal places. What I want to do is come into my document properties. And I want to start going through here. So I've got, I can't zoom in. I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of an open arrow. So I may want to figure out exactly what kind of arrow I want to use. Do I want to do the closed off? And this is kind of preference. There are certain things though, like that stand for different things. So if you're calling out a surface finish, it's not narrow, it's a different shape. Normally by standards, arrows are for dimensions and pointing to things, you know, like radiuses and that. If you're calling out a surface finish, a lot of times it's a dot. It just helps people to know, because you're not actually pointing to an arrow, you're actually going to put the dot on the part. So I personally like these little half arrows. You can adjust your borders. Come into the dimensioning. Here, again, we kind of showed this when we were modeling the part. Exact same thing. We only want 2 dimensions, or 1 or 2. You can come in, you can adjust the width of the arrow. So if I come in and let's say, what one do I want to dimension here? No. We'll go with this one. So you can see I just changed it to 50. And basically the length of that arrow from the start to finish went that distance. Now that's obviously not something what I want to do. Oops, let's go back with 12. And some of the stuff you've got to play with to see, or find a tutorial that shows you exactly what it looks like. So there we're back, and it's just basically showing that leader length. Now, like I say, I like my arrows to be filled in. So we're going to come down here, and the style is going to be that half arrow. Or you can do the edge breaks that, or the half arrows. Or that's personal preference. What you can also do is you can see here where the arrows are on the inside of the leader lines. Depending on the drawing and how tight things are, maybe you want to have them on the outside. So I'll go and do that and show you. Oops. Didn't do that. Should have changed that. Maybe I got the wrong thing. But anyways, the gaps in between the extension lines, tolerance settings, diameter leaders snap to certain angles. So, you know, if you put a diameter, it will, if you've got a circle here, it will do snaps in 15-degree elements versus you trying to rotate it around. If you need more freedom, you want to set that to 0 because sometimes you want to work around other dimensions. And then you're going to continue to get into all the other information. You know, getting it set for sizes, getting it set for getting it set for lengths, and basically adjusting it as you go. Was there going to be a question there?
Chevis, yeah. I'm following along as you're going, and I'm jumping back and forth. Could you repeat how to change whether or not there's whether it's rounded to 1 decimal place or 2 or 3?
Yeah, so where that comes down is over here in the middle, primary precision.
Okay.
And you just adjust that.
I'm on this right now, so okay, I see it. Thanks.
And usually, again, 2 dimensions is all that's needed. Sometime, or 2 decimal places is all that's really needed. Sometimes it's even just 1. It all depends on what you're doing and what the standard is.
Okay.
So again, you can go down and usually it shows an image. So you can see here, if I was to do an arc, it kind of, and maybe you can't see it. Let me see if I can find an angle dimension that'll let me do that. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to dimension the angle there. And you can kind of see how that's not going to give me what I want. So here I can adjust where the arrows are. So here you can kind of see the witness line, leader lines go to the outside of it. I can change them so that they're going to that angle there. Oh, that one doesn't do anything. I can also come in, instead of changing things up in this area, I can change it for that specific dimension. That's going to give me that opportunity to adjust. Now, here, I'm trying to get this angle to 90 degrees. I don't necessarily like that. So what I can do is I can come in and you can do a sketch. And for this, we're just going to do a center line. So I can come in and draw a line if it's not there for me to reference to. And then I can do that dimension too. Now, what I would normally do is try to find the best way to get that angle. So here we've got that angle. We're going to make it driving. I want to move the arrows to the inside just because it's going to clean things up a little bit more versus hanging out. I can change the thickness of the line weight if I want. So all of this stuff on the left-hand side here is if I want to make a specific change to that dimension, in the sense of not changing the number, but changing its appearance, versus going up here, changes it as a default setting. So a lot of times what happens is you'll dimension everything out, and then you'll be like, okay, here it is. Well, I need to change this one so the dimensions on the inside or the outside. And then that's how you kind of start getting it to be a little bit more customized. We're not going to worry too much about that, because really right now I want to make sure that we just get down to the key elements. So for example here for linear, you can see where you can have it sitting on top of the line, or you can have it sitting inside the line. So it comes down to what do you want. So there the arrows are on the outside with the dimension above. There the dimension is internal and the arrows are pointing inwards. So some of this is what do you prefer. I personally prefer when the dimensions are inside the lines. Now that's one thing that you'll learn. There is best practices. You know, there's making sure things that you don't over dimension. You know, you don't want to have, if you've got two drawings or two views, I don't want to dimension here, the width, and then also at the same time, come down and dimension over here. There's no need to have that dimension twice. Plus, there's always a chance that I might get it wrong. So that's one of the cardinal rules. Now, whether I dimension it over here or I use this dimension, that can be somewhat subjective. It's what works best for the drawing. So there's no hard and fast rule of thumb. I usually like to try to keep things somewhat logical, so that if I was going up here and then I would on this point too, I would like to try to do the height across the front here. And that's something else where you can kind of see, whoops, delete that. You can see here, to get the overall height, I can't get a dimension off of there because it automatically gives me my diameter of that circle. This is where I would need to come in, draw a line, and it always wants to be, you always want to do it as a center line, because a dashed line basically means it's not part of the actual object. And what I want to do is I want to snap to this, just so it gives me a point that'll allow me to snap to from a dimension standpoint. So now I can get an overall height here, and we're just going to go up to the tippy top, and go there. And you can see I did what I told you guys not to do. I've got some very unique numbers on here. But that's okay. Now, you can kind of see here, I kind of got rid of my default. I changed it. This might be fine if I'm doing a tight dimension somewhere where I don't want those big leader lines coming in. So that works there like that. You know, because it's a small, tight area, I'm not going to be able to get that dimension in there. Same as over here. That kind of works for that. Does not work for the larger dimensions. So that's where you want to make sure that you have the right part. Let's see if I can just change that in here. So there I went in for this particular part and I put it in the middle. Now, what I usually do is by default, I start with what I want, which is always in the center. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to do that one, and I'm always going to put it on the inside. There. So you can kind of see it changes the whole page. And then if I need to, I'll then adjust the ones that I have to versus trying to dimension them all. Does that make sense? Because doesn't feel like I'm saying it in a logical order.
question. So the dimension that you have at 7.50, that smaller one on the side view, right now the numbers are vertical. How would you get them to be horizontal if you wanted them to be horizontal?
Yes, because I like them horizontal too. I don't know how I do it in this one. There we go. So customize text. So again, in this screen, it only applies to that dimension. Okay. If I come out and I go to, let me just hit check mark, because you can see it now is just for that one. If I come here and I go to options, document properties, dimensions, I gotta find it here. No. Man, I'm out of date for this. Here we go. So that's under linear. And then what we can do is, so you can have it above, or you can always have it horizontal or aligned to the text. So we'll just go horizontal for everything. And then you can see that. I personally like that. Now there are rules of thumb that some people, the logic is that when your dimension is a vertical dimension, then your text is vertical. If it's the horizontal, then your text is horizontal. That's the logic between that. Again, I prefer horizontal because it's easier for me to understand the numbers. But that's fine. It doesn't really matter one way or the other. Now, if we also come in here, you can kind of see how that still doesn't really read all that well. Well, you can click on it. You can drag the number so that it's in the middle or it's up above. So it's not just about dumping the number in and leaving where it is. You have to kind of adjust it so that it's easy and clear to read. Questions so far, is this making sense? Okay, silence is golden. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, delete this, delete this, and delete this, and this. So this is an assembly drawing. It has all the components in there. What we want to do is we want to give some base dimensions. So this is kind of where you mentioned, Simon, you know, what happens when it gets messy. You know, obviously, I can't get in there and start dimensioning all these things. It just doesn't make sense. So on this particular page, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in. I've gone back. I've got my options all set up for how I want my drawing. Oops. So we make sure that we have the styles that we want. I've decided I don't like that one, and I'm going to go to the arrows. We're going to say we liked the text size. We're going to say all this is good for all intents and purposes. These are all specific to different dimensions, like radiuses. When you dimension a radius, same thing. Is it on the solid leader? Is it in the horizontal? Is it dimensions? So for each one of the dimensions, you go in and you adjust all this to get what you want. Same as dashed lines, thick lines, you can change all of that. So, but let's assume we like everything we have. We're going to come in, and no matter what, in the least, you want to have, in an overview drawing, height, width, and length. So for this, since it's an assembly, we want to do the full height, the full width, and the full length. That would apply to if we're doing a individual part as well. So we're going to come in and we're going to look at it, and it's basically determining, okay, where can I put the dimensions that are going to make the best sense? Many times it's good to have, you know, if you can do the height and the width on one part, why not? You know, or you can do, you know, you just don't want to double down. So for this, let's just go with, because I don't want to have to draw a line to snap to there, I'm pretty sure I can just snap to that line. We'll go up to the top, grab that. And there we've got that dimension. Now for here, we're going to try to do all the vertical stuff. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to do the base of here. And what you can do is you can just kind of quickly dump them on. But then it's a matter of saying, okay, well, I've got the dimensions there, but it looks like crap. So what do I want to do? I want to adjust them and pull them out. And I forget who, but I think someone mentioned about organizing them. So the shortest one, I'm going to have it close. The next height, I'm going to have here. Then the next one is going to be here and there. Now, what I like to do is I usually try to put the number in the center of the dimension. And as I'm looking at this too, I'm thinking that my arrows are too big, my numbers are too big for what I'm doing. It's going to become cumbersome. So I would go back in and just say, okay, you know what? I've tossed a few dimensions in. I don't like it. Let's make these a little bit smaller. So that's that one. So let's just go with 1.5. Oops. Anyway, I'm not going to mess with it. But you would want to adjust it because I know that it's going to get cumbersome. Now, I don't need to do the height on this one or anything else because I've got it all right here.
Hey, Travis.
Yeah.
Before you go on to the next part, those 4 dimensions that you just did, how would you, is there a way in Solidworks to line them up so that they're equally spaced? Or do you just have to do it by eye?
I would hope that there is, but I don't know how to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So 2D drawing is not my forte in this software because I haven't had to do it for 10 years because I hand off 3D models and it's all done with that. Now, you can also see I gave general dimensions. So it all depends on what you want to do. No one actually knows what this width is unless you do the math. But what I can do is I wouldn't want to toss in this width in here because you can kind of see if I try to do that, it starts to get kind of messy. But what I've got over here is a perfect size. So I can dump that dimension there. And again, what I'm getting into now see, here's where I don't want it centered because it's too much, so I'd want to move it outside. I can click on that specific one. And I could do that. So it's now a little bit more readable. So that's not, it's not, you set the dimension style and it's got to be like that for everything. You adjust it for what works for your drawing. Now here, this is where I find this to be messy. I like to have it nice and clean. So this is where the art comes in. it should be a nice, clean visual drawing. You know, something that you can clearly read and understand. Now, the challenge would be in an assembly drawing, do I need to have these numbers? I would say probably not unless I need them for some reason, because I'm going to blow that part out and give all those dimensions. So again, these are more generalized dimensions. So the next one.
That being said,
Yep.
For our redo of this part, did you want more specific dimensions or did you want general dimensions
So
for this specific configuration?
yeah. So what I'm going to want you to do, whether you use the train or whether you use your own part, what I'm going to want you to do is to do a overall general dimensions. So kind of like this. What are the control dimensions? But then I want you to take one part and detail it out more. And I'll grab a part here in a second and show that.
Okay.
So again, I'm going to come up here and I'm actually going to click on my dimension first. Now, really the question is, do we need any other dimensions? You know, maybe we want to toss on some here. It all depends on what you want to do or what this drawing is for. When I did this, the parts and the drawings were to send off to China so that they could come back and say what the tooling cost would be and what the part cost would be. They literally needed to know what is the overall size of the part, how many components are there, and then since all they needed to know was how big the tooling was, length, width, and height is all they really cared about, because that told them how big the tool was going to be. And by knowing how big the tool is and how big the part is, they could determine the cost of the tooling. They could determine the approximate amount of plastic that would be needed for that part, and that would allow them to give you a piece part. So everything is different. So I'm going to say,
I have a question.
Yep.
So, like, manufacturers, like, they're the ones that designers are, like, interacting with the most, or are we usually sending these, like, Solidworks drawings to engineers first before they send it off to the manufacturer? Or
So
is it just kind of like a base by base thing? Or?
yeah, I mean, it depends. It depends on your skill sets. It depends on what you're responsible for. It depends on a variety of things. So
Okay.
usually in the beginning of your career, you shouldn't be sending stuff off to the manufacturer for them to be finalized. You should always have someone be reviewing them. So I told you about that designer who made the $100,000, $80,000 tooling mistake. Well,
Yeah.
I made a $20,000 one in the first 4 months of my career, wherein I asked an engineer to look at it. He said, I don't have time, just send it off. So I sent it off. They started tooling it, and there was an undercut.
I would say that you didn't make that mistake. The engineer did by saying, I don't have time to look at it.
Well, the project manager came back and started ripping on me. The VP walked in and said, whoa, hold on. Chevis, you just made a $20,000 mistake. I hope you learned your lesson. And I'm like, yeah, I'll make sure someone checks it. He's right. And he looked at the project engineer and he says, you should know better. You don't ever make that mistake again. Because it was his responsibility to make sure it was checked. My boss's point of view was, the kid's 4 months out of school. Okay? You don't let them send stuff off for tooling. So, in your career, I've worked directly with the manufacturers, or the engineers have worked directly with them, but I usually like to have some interaction, because when a problem arises, it's good to help fix things on the fly. you know, especially sometimes if it's an aesthetic thing. We had an issue with a tool, and I got a call from Asia and the engineer at 3 a.m. And it was basically, we've got a problem. What are you willing to accept to change? And I said, well, what's the problem? They're like, we got a water line running through here, which is for cooling. And I said, well, what would you change? He goes, this is our only option. It's like, well, it's either scrap a $100,000 tool or do that.
Right.
As designers, we don't always get those decisions. So one thing I've noticed, and this is my little rant, in the education system, teachers aren't doing a very good job of maybe sometimes setting real world expectations for what it's like when we get out in the field. As designers, we don't always have the be all end all say. Sometimes people are going to tell us this is what you're going to do. And it's not necessarily a designer telling us that. So we always want to be able to work with them, understand what the problem is so that we can provide options as well. Okay, off my rant. So basically, the rest of the dimensions, maybe... All right, that's that other side. You know, so maybe a couple dimensions here. Again, you can see I can't grab that. So, but since I'm doing a few control dimensions, let's draw a line in there. And what I'm doing is... Oh, well, here, let me show you this. Make sure you grab the right point. You can kind of see I grabbed the wrong edge. Well, that's going to be a big problem because my dimensions are going to be off. Okay, so now maybe what I want to do is I want to just give a general height for this one because I don't have it dimensioned on there. See, and I'm finding that for what I'm doing and the size of the parts, my arrows, everything is too big. I would want to scale these all down considerably more because I've got too much detail in here. Because you can see how, in order to get it to fit, it looks like, well, in my opinion, it looks poor. So I would want to come in and change the dimension leader size, even the dimension sizes. And it's fine. You can do that as you go. I don't do it enough to know anymore right off the bat. So I can come in, click on font. Here is all of my font controls. So I can change the font type. So if you have a brand, or if your design firm does, you know, so for my projects, I've got a font that I use throughout all my branding. If I was to do a 2D drawing like this, the hell I would have that font in there. It's just keeping that consistent brand image. But we're going to change this, and let's just say we're going to make it 3.5, 1.75. We'll cut it in half. Length of the arrow, let's go 3. Height of the arrow, we'll leave that alone. Okay, so maybe I want a little small. And I still don't have the arrows right. But you can now see that it looks a little bit better, not as clunky. So that's kind of, you know, determine the overall dimensions that you want. It's hard at this point, like, you know, what are the most important dimensions? But, you know, you kind of toss in whatever ones you think are the most important. Or if this is the only drawing you're doing and, you know, that's all you need, maybe you toss in some dimensions. You know, what is this diameter? So now here, I could do that and put the diameter there. Or what is cleaner can I put the diameter up here? So it really depends on what you want to do and what's going to work best for your dimensioning. So I would probably, for me personally, I would probably dump it all the way up here, because what I can then do is I could look at this. I could draw a center line through all of them. I don't know why that's there, so let's just hide that. It was a drawing that I missed. Because then what I can do is I can dimension these all on this one view versus trying to have some here. And what I mean by that is I can now come in, dimension that. I don't necessarily need to dimension it all the way. What I could do is I can come in and I can add TYP, which stands for typical. So what that means is, here's the 4 dimensions. This is typical, meaning that this dimension here to here to here is all the same, versus trying to dump in all the dimensions. Then I'm going to toss a dimension there. And then I also want to toss one more dimension here. Yeah. Sorry, I keep asking me if I want dimension driven, and I just got to turn that off. Now, again, is that needed for this drawing? It all depends. I probably wouldn't have done that. I would have just done that as the blown out part. So, there we've got the overall dimensions. Before I pick out a separate part, is there questions? Is this helping to give you a little bit more insight on how to do your drawing layouts and your dimensioning to get it closer to what you would do by hand?
Definitely.
Okay.
For the radii, the consistent radii there, would you put TYP for that as well, Travis?
For the radii, oh yeah, if I've got, so I would do that on a part, because there's not a consistent radius in here. But if I was to blow out this part, then yeah, if it was all, the radiuses were all like 0.1, I would do 0.1, point it to one of the radii, and then just call that typical. And what that means is, typical is,
Thornton told us about typical.
did he?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, if I call out typical here, that means unless there's a dimension on a different radii, so this would be 0.5, this would be 0.5, that's the assumption, unless I put another dimension up here, and that's 0.65. But anything else, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, that's what it means. So unless I call out a separate dimension, assume it's all 0.5. The dangerous thing about that is if you miss one that isn't. Okay, so sheet 1. Let's come down. Let's go into properties. Let's go in and call this full assembly. Because again, it's kind of like layers in Illustrator. You hand off a Illustrator file to the production people. Make sure your layers are named properly. It just guarantees that there's going to be problems. So now,
Hey, Travis, I have a question.
Yep.
So are there different types of like control drawings for like different manufacturing processes?
I would say help me to understand. So in your
So, like,
mind,
if I was gonna do like something that's, I don't know, say injection molded versus like 3D printed, or
ah,
um,
so really what that comes down to is, so it's not a different standard. It's more about your design. You know, so when you're doing a 3D printed part, say versus injection molding, you know, your tolerances are going to be different. So for injection molding, and you all know what I mean by tolerances.
I do.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So for injection molding, your tolerance may be plus or minus 0.01, wherein for 3D printing, it might be 0.1 plus or minus. So what that means is if I have a dimension of 5.2, it could either be 5.21 or it could be 5.19. And that's an acceptable tolerance, which means that when I do my drawing, my tolerances would change. And then really what it comes down to is how you model your part. You know, if I'm modeling a part for rotational molding, well, my radiuses are going to be bigger, you know, various things. Now, when it comes to, say, hatching or doing your hatching, materials have specific hatching. So steel, and I don't remember what they are anymore, but let's say, you know, a piece of metal, the hatching may be line, dot, line, dot, line. You know, that could be steel. Where in plastic, maybe it's all line. I don't remember. But that's kind of, it's more part specific versus manufacturing specific. But tolerances change. You know, obviously for rotational molding, tolerances are bigger. Automotive, you know, doing an exterior body part, I remember it was a big leap for me to go from injection molding where my tolerances were plus or minus like a millimeter. And then when I started working on exterior parts of the car, it was plus or minus quarter of an inch. Big difference. So
Isn't NASA like, or a lot of it's craft for NASA, the tolerances are like 10 millionths of an inch.
Oh yeah, we just our family company just had parts that went onto the SpaceX, and we do coatings, but even the thickness of the coating that needed to go on had to be so precise. I mean, you're using micrometers to ensure quality control.
Yeah, that's same in watchmaking too.
Yeah, even a coating, like like a coating that goes on to make the steel hardened or whatever, you ain't got no room. So
Yeah, and there's this one watch company that just released a watch, and it's an automatic watch, and it's 2 millimeters thick.
oh jeez. Okay, so let's dive in here because we've only got about 16 minutes left. So we're going to add a sheet. And we're right back to it. Well, didn't do this because it's a new sheet. What we're going to do is... come on. Shoot, what do I got wrong here? Why is it not letting me add a part? Okay. So I'm not going to worry about adjusting them. But here's where you're going to get into more of the detailed oriented parts. So, because I wouldn't be able to dimension all of this on there. First, you can see where I've got my drawings for my holes from the 2D CAD drawing. Maybe I want to keep it, maybe I don't. This actually is useful. So again, we're going to come back and we're going to do the same thing. Start with your overall general dimensions. So we want to do width. Now, because this is a smaller part or a larger page, I want to go back in, go into my options, adjust my font size. Because again, for each page you're doing and each part you're doing, you may have to tweak it and adjust it. Font. We're just going to go big. So I'm going to get my overall dimensions here. Come on. Oh, just so you guys know too, I told the story about when you guys started calling me Chevy. And now I have a neighbor who she takes pure delight in seeing me cringe every time I walk in and she calls me Chevy. So I want to thank you guys for that.
No problem.
So here we're going to go in and we're just going to start dimensioning things more. Now, if you want to make sure that there's no mistakes, you don't have to use typical because I've got the space to do it. So I'm going to come in, dimension everything, and then again, you want to make sure, try to keep things clean, you know, line them up. And then over here, yeah, so you could add that as typical. Let's go with leader. No, I don't want to do that. So we'll go with that. And then I want to change. Yeah, I think I'll go with that. So you can see I can move it off this way. You want to try to keep it close to where it is. Ideally, you always want the dimensions on the outside for the major ones, but you also want to keep it close to where you're going. Like you can see if I pull this all the way out here, I got to really look to see where it goes versus having it in here. And then you can see here where I don't want to necessarily do the diameter on the inside because it's not enough space. So let's just come in and we'll do it. There we go. So you can see what I did is I moved it so that the arrow was on the outside and the text was on the outside. And this is where in the customization, the presets, you could go in and make whatever it is default. So normally if I was to set this up properly, I would have that as a default because more often than not, that's the way I'm going to have my dimensions read. So here again, you could do this one as typical. And you don't always have to do the same dimension there. So now here we can go and do the internal one. And again, this is why you want to have that default setting right so that I don't have to tweak it and change it every single time. There we go. But now, same thing, we're going to start dimensioning things. And since I've got the heights up there, the question is do I want this one above it? Why not? And the reason I'm doing that above there is because in my mind, all these dimensions are the width of the roof. So why wouldn't I just have that one above there so that when a person looks at, hey, what are the lengths of these? Then I can just see it right off the bat. You know, same as if I was to come in here and do these dimensions. Again, I would want to go back in and make things smaller so that they better fit. You can see I'm starting to cut in my title block. If I have to have that title block, then I can move it. All these are interconnected because you want to make sure that they stay locked. Then, you know, it's basically continue. So now up on this part, what are my dimensions? I don't need to dimension these because they're all there. I don't need to dimension the diameters. But now, let's say this was too clunky in here. Well, it may have been better for me to come up here and dimension it this way. You know, what works better? I like it down here because that way all the dimensions to these, you know, are the same. Oops, I also wanted to dimension... no. So see, I don't like that in the place there, but if I come out here, I don't mind that. And the reason I'm doing this one over here is because if I was to do it over here, it gets very clunky. Whole lot of stuff I've got to try to move around. Plus, it makes sense that this is the height, the width of these components. It's fine to blow it out here because I can now see this clearly and read through what that is. But you can see, if I tried to dimension that all on here, it would get very clunky because there's so many more things I have to work around versus just having it like this. It may be too that on this one, if I remember correctly, yes, I've got a center post. So I may want to dimension that too. So over here, I'm going to turn that specifically on so I can do that. We'll dimension that. Come on. We'll dimension that. Now again, I can't reinforce it enough. Go back and tweak and adjust things and do it in the very beginning, because if you don't do it in the beginning, then you have to try and change everything at once. Because if I go in now, so let's say I had made some custom modifications to each one. If I go in now to do it, it would change all the custom ones. But for this one, we're going to go there. And we're going to take this one, we're going to go that way too. It just makes it a little bit easier to read. So do you see what I'm talking about? Like, so here's the multiple sheets, and I would have a sheet for each and one of these parts. I would also then have a sheet. Where am I going to? I'm not going to be able to get that, I don't think. So here, I've got those parts. If I want to grab a part that's in the assembly, I'm going to go Browse. And then I'm going to pull up the individual parts. And this is why I'm saying when you do the 2D drawings, it needs to reference from something. So I'm going to come in, and it could be as simple as, and you would literally have this, I'm going to have an axle. That is all this part is. It's going to say axle. And it's going to be as simple as I've got a diameter and I've got a length. That drawing is done. I might have a call out for the material or the finish, but that's it. You're going to come in, edit the sheet. If it's got a... Oh, no, that's not what I want to do. You're going to name the sheet. You're going to name the part. If it's simply XM741 axle. Okay. We got like 2 minutes unless you guys want to hang on later. Is this... Do you feel what I've shown you here, is this enough for you guys to feel comfortable with going back and redimensioning either the train part I gave you here or one of your drawings?
Yes.
You're just looking for 2 sheets, correct?
Yeah, I want a overall assembly dimension and then just grab one part or a detail. Oh, that's
Okay,
some...
can you show us how you want us to like export it?
So, you know what? For this, just to make life easier, just go files. Oh, hold on. So file save as, and then it should do this all right. Let's just go with a PDF. So Chevis Watkinson drafting part, and then whatever else. Sorry, I'm being a smart ass. I just want to see if this should this. Yeah, so here it comes up and it says what sheets do you want to export? Just make sure all the, by default it shows all of them. So hit OK. It spits them all out. Ah, come on. And then it'll give you the drawings. So this is going to be my level of expectation as part of one of the phases for our first project, is to be doing drawings and to have them done like this. I will get you guys, I will do a quick video to show you how to customize the toolbox. And I'll give you one that you guys can use easily enough. So, just to keep things clean. Quickly to touch base, I've seen all of the stuff that you guys have sent in for what you want. What I would ask is between, in the next day or two, dump your pages up on the Workshare for everyone to see them. I'm very comfortable with all your choices or all the categories you want to go in. So feel free, but by next class or sooner than that, or you know what? By Friday, I want you to pick the specific product that you're going to do. Oh, you should all be writing this down. By Friday, I want you to send me the specific product that you're going to do for the first phase or the first project. By Wednesday of our next class, I want you to have created a drawing that, and it could just be an overlay of whatever modifications you are going to do. You don't have to do any design changes, but if you want to do a design change, then I want to see what that's going to be. And it can be in a simple perspective sketch. I want to see a nice, clear, communicative sketch. And then what I also want you to do is to take your first stab at breaking it out. So let me just pull up an image here. And when I say breaking it out, taking the first stab at how you think your plan of attack is going to be. So, what is going to be the main primary surface that you're going to build, you know. So here for this part, you know, going to take an overbuild approach, you know, and you don't have to show this, but I'm going to overbuild my surfaces. I'm going to get the general form here. This is going to be my secondary forms that I get. You know, this is the detail I'm going to add. I want them to be quick sketches, but I don't want them to be so rough that I can't figure it out. So just to reiterate, pick the product that you're going to do. Have that to me by Friday. Upload your... just email it to me.
Okay.
So for now, just assume all deliverables are to be emailed to me.
But share our 3 possible choices.
Sorry. Yes. Put your categories up there.
But our final choice is email.
Email, yes. Because, okay, so let me start over here and articulate it a little more clearly. I want you to post your 3 areas up under the work share. As students, as you look at that, if you decide that there's something completely different that piques your interest versus what you sent me, that is fine. Use that to pick it. But by Friday, I want to see, if you want to do a toaster, I want to see a toaster. You know, by Wednesday, I want to see that toaster with whatever design changes you're going to make, as well as a plan of attack on how do you think you're going to build this.
What about the people who were looking into building the same thing kind of step by step as you were?
Yes. We're doing a toaster.
Oh, we're doing a toaster? Okay.
Yeah. I've decided I want to go back and do kitchen appliances. So I'm just going to go back and have some fun. So we'll do a toaster. Who all wants to do the follow along project? No one?
I mean, I do.
Okay.
I would go through it well.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with a concept. So I'm going to have the exact same deliverables for you guys so that we can all work along. So by Wednesday of next week, I'll have the product. I'll have a sketch for what refinements I think I want to make, or I may just make my very own design. I don't want you guys to start from scratch unless you really think you can hammer it out and get it there. That's your choice. But what I'm looking for is a fully articulated concept so that, again, you're not trying to design 100% while you're in SolidWorks. Yada, 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 yada. So we've got posting to the share. We've got what you owe on Friday. We have what you owe on Wednesday. And then do Wednesday, or let me rephrase that. Do prior to class on Wednesday, I want the detailed 2D drawings done. Does everybody have that? Any questions on deliverables?
I think I'm all set. Thank you, Travis, for the demo and stuff today. It was really helpful.
Yep. Awesome. So we went over by it a little bit. No worries. Before I sign out, does anybody have questions? They want one-on-one chat? Anything like that? Or are we all good?
I could have a chat with you if you have time.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question too.
Sure.
Same question Simon.
Okay. I will get these videos shoot